Well, thank you very much for inviting me to share our findings with you all. I have a lot of sheets to show, so I go very fast. So if everybody has questions, we can discuss it after my presentation. Okay, the content. A short overview of what is Zuilenstein. I tell something about the kitchen garden. How did we restore it? How do we exploit it at the moment? I tell something about our findings and acting for Zuilenstein as a food-producing estate and the relevance for nowadays society. At first, where are we in Holland? We are quite in the center of Holland, as you can see by the red dot, and we are on a special landscape because in Holland is a quite flat country, except where we are. We have there the kind of Dutch mountains. The highest part is about 70 meters, I think, but we are really downhill lateral moraine, which is 18,000 years old and coming from Norway. On the right, you see on Google Maps with a red line, the surroundings of the estate, and you can see it's all orthogonal and all straight organized as a Renaissance estate is. To give you an idea of the dimensions, it's 125 hectare, of which 50 hectares is a classified monument of 17th century Dutch Renaissance. We have some woods, we have meadows, arable fields, and in the lower areas, which are more wetlands, like we have some coppice as well. Historical research has been done by a landscape architect, and that gives a nice overview. On the left, you see the Zuilenstein estate at 1630. That was the year that Frederik Hendrik, son of William of Orange, bought the estate. You see it was quite small when you compare it to the pictures I did show before. And you can see that in a very short time it developed. And it developed up to, on the far right, in 1710. And that is the highest, the most important phase of the gardens, of the walled gardens and of the estate. Then I go to the next one. What did we find? We found this drawing, which was hanging in my family's house. Since I was a child, I always saw it, never paid much attention to it until recently, since I took over the estate in 2012, and then I started studying it, really studying it, because it's a beautiful drawing and it shows how this estate was at 1710. Why was it made? It was made not as it was normally made, those drawings, as a kind of artist impression about your view for the future. No, it was really made to show how it was at that time. Because at 1710, the the Count of Rochford, Nassau-Zuilenstein, son of Frederik Hendrik, he inherited this estate, but he lived in England. He was one of the people who went with the Glorious Revolution, went to England with the Koning Stadhouder, William III. And he made this drawing, had this etching made to show his friends how it was. You can see all the small pictures surrounding the center etching, and that's telling a lot of the buildings and of what was happening there. It tells about the fish, the dovecots, and everything they had, the gardens, the fruit gardens, etc. So this one is very important drawing and a source of inspiration. The banner showing the importance of the owner, and you can see how proud they were, and you see all the fruits and showing and the cereal the angels are carrying. To zoom into the drawing, you can see it was a very detailed drawing, and it's quite amazing how they did this area. And here you can see the most important line under the drawing. And it says that it was drawn true to life by Daniel Stopendaal. And that is quite exceptional, because Stopendaal made a lot of drawings of surrounding estates, but never this text has been seen before. And what did he draw? A French garden in Holland, because Frederick Hendrik, son of William of Orange, and his wife, his mother was Louise de Coligny. She was a lady in waiting at Versailles. So he lived a year at Versailles. So, and apparently he was inspired by the French garden. And we found in the old books that Mollet, pupil of Le Notre, visited Zuilenstein. When we are looking at the etching, we found out two things: that really it was a food producing estate. I'll show you later. And also we found out that the whole estate was designed by the conditions of Vitruvius: the firmness, the ease of use, and the pleasure. And that is been mixed at Zuilenstein in this drawing is at the most beautiful way. I show you the drawing with some arrows and some colors to show quickly which is where. We have the fields where you can see that even a horse is plowing the fields. We have a thing called the plantage, that was where the trees were grown, because at that time only the estates had trees, because the whole area, the trees were taken away to build Amsterdam, to build the big ships for the VOC. You can see outside the walled garden an orchard with high trees, and you can see on the right side the groves. In brown, you see the walls. I have to take away all the heads, put it somewhere else. Yeah. You can see the circle part. At first you would say it's a garden for leisure and pleasure. No, it is, but as well, it's an orchard. You can see that only a quarter of the walled garden is for fun, is a parterre garden with flowers and herbs. And another quarter is the kitchen garden and orchard. And you can see in this drawing how important they found their kitchen garden and the orchard, because it's on the center part of the drawing. There were also fish ponds, 5, which means they were really growing fish for production. There are 5 stages, the fish. And what you can see, there were a lot of fruit trees. On the far left, outside the walled garden, there were high stem trees, but inside the walled garden, they were all dwarf trees, smaller trees. Some were bush-shaped, but some, and especially in the kitchen garden, were the dwarf trees, the arbre nain in French, buisson nain, and in Dutch, we translated it at that time to naantje. And naantje, we know in the Dutch garden history, but the naantje in Holland has the form of a vase you put flowers in. Why did they do this? Because it was easy to harvest when you visit the garden with your friends, because the garden was not for production only, but also for leisure and showing to your friends. But also the position of your gardener was very important, and he shows his expertise while pruning and taking care of all the different species. And as the French Mr. Dumont, which was the pépinière in the near Troyes, where we bought all those historical trees, French trees, he told me it was like a boîte de bijouterie. You have to see your garden like that, as a collection. Then in the kitchen garden, next to one of the fishing ponds, we have an orangerie, a small orangerie. And then while zooming in to the kitchen garden, you can see we have several kinds of fruit trees. We have on the left the naantje, but you can see, and we found out checking on the shades in this etching, that the Nijntje used here was not as we know it in Holland, not the face shaped, but it was a fan shaped. Bas tige on a low stem, fan shaped Nijntje, which is very special. And the Monsieur Dumont in Troyes, where we bought the trees, he told us that the fan shaped Nijntje was also had been grown in Versailles until the 19th century. And then it was replaced by hedges of fruit trees. So he told us we are the only vegetable of a kitchen garden, historic kitchen garden, which has the fan-shaped Nijntje in Europe, so as far as he knew. We also have the palmette à la diable. You can see it on the walls in this drawing. And there were, on the right, you see 4 little lines. And then we found out it was also a special, well-known form in France, the cordon vertical. And here they are standing free, and we saw them in Versailles, that they were grown against the wall. We also have in this drawing, you can see the gold frames. And the gold frames still has to be restored. And on the right, you can see the beds where the seedlings that were grown in the gold frames went into right after. What is also interesting in this drawing, you can see that they made a combination of perennials like berries with annuals in the grow beds. So it's a quite of a modern way of nowadays way of growing, because now you want to mix. And in the 19th century, they made those big bird cages with the red fruits, because when you put all the red fruits together, the birds see them from long distance, and now they have to search for the berries. How did we start with the restoration? This is what we found in 2012. You can see there was a lot of green, but not the green we really wanted. Another one, there were a lot of sheds and things and machines and dog houses, etc. So it was quite a thing to organize with a lot of volunteers. At first, we cleaned the garden. We had to arrange subsidies. We had to made calculations. We made plans, and all according to the Stopendal etching, because we found out that the Stopendal etching really compared to a plan made by a surveyor of the walls and of the ponds, you could really put them one on the other, as you can see here. On the left, we took out the perspective of the Stopendal, and we could use it as a sketch design for the really. On the right, you see the working drawing of the landscape architect. And you can see the ratio between the smallest pathways and the middle pathway. And the middle pathway is about 5.5 meters wide, which is exceptionally wide for Holland's standards, because in Holland we are always very practical. We are a small country, so we are always very efficient. There's normally in the Dutch kitchen garden, when a path is as wide as 2 chariots when you use for maintaining your garden or for taking out your harvest, that's wide enough in Holland. But here you can see it's really a garden to show off, to show to your friends. This was after the great cleanup, and when we got subsidies from the government and from foundations, we could start to really clean it up. And on the right, you see one tree which doesn't fit in the story I told you before. And this is what we call our subsidy trees, because there were still some old trees, and then you get a subsidy for the trees because it's restoration. If there hadn't been any old trees, it was renovation, then you don't get money. I don't know if it's in other countries the same, but here it works like this. Then you can see the phase where the pathways were made, and you see the edging of the major beds. On the left in the high, you see how the trees came from Troyes to Holland. You see the trellises being made next to the walls, and on the right, beautiful irises we also bought in France. This was the opening in 2016. You get some impression about the change. A year later, we did a lot of experiments with hay and to keep the soil moist and covered. But because we used biological hay, it also brought us a lot of bad herbs. So take care with doing that. Two things you can see on the left and on the right, 2 years, you can see that every year we grow different species on different areas. We have this rotation system, well known, but you can also see we grow different crops next to each other. And that is strip cropping that we're checking here. So we check on the influences between two different types of vegetables to put them next to the other. 2021, you see everything gets more mature, and on the left you can see the effect of the fan-shaped trees, fruit trees, and that they bring a kind of a coulisse landscape. 21, a picture taken out of the orangerie, and here you see that one more restoration has to be done, and that is the restoration of the pond. This is in wintertime. You can see very well the structure. We also reconstructed the beds like the Stopendal drawing. And on the right, you see the fruit trees in blossom. Here we did the next project, and that was the restoration of the pond next to the vegetable garden. On the right, you see as it was until 2020. A lot of trees which were put there in the 19th century by someone who rented the house. Only inside the wall gardens, some 19th century influences were made. And this is how it is now. So you can walk around the pond and use the central entrance to the vegetable garden. You see here how lucky we are that we have all those drawings, all those little drawings which were around the Stopendal etching, because it gives us a lot of information. This is what we do with all those vegetables. We try to sell them, and a lot of people from the neighborhood are coming to our shop inside the orangerie. And you see it's a bit a makeshift shop. It's not very glossy, but that's a choice we made. We also sell produce from other producers, like the eggs from a neighboring chicken farmer. But everything else here is for us. We have some cheese. We also sell bread from our own cereal. And we have another group of clients which are restaurants. And then you can see we tried the mini vegetables here. And restaurants, the more high level they are, the more difficult they are, the more special produce they want. And we also have a restaurant on the estate. And since this year, we have in the kitchen garden, we sell flowers, and people can cut their own flowers, and that's a real success. People really love it. We put up a lot of baskets and people come to do that. We work with about 40 volunteers. Some of them work in the forest, in the woods, and a lot of them work in the kitchen garden and in the shop. And we have 2 staff, you see on the right side. What else do we do for relevance? Not just producing the vegetables, but also we didn't want to make it just a museum garden, but we also want to make it a relevant garden where we do research like they did in the 17th century. Innovation was always very important. So we worked together with the University of Wageningen. And on our small scale, we are kind of a test area where we make a combination with low tech and high yield. And we learned a lot from a book, I forgot the name of the book now, which was written in end of the 19th century about les maraîchers, the food producers around Paris, where we learned a lot of high yield production. I'm not going to tell all these items which are on the coming few slides, because that takes a lot of time, but you can read it afterwards. What is an important thing is when you're a museum garden, but also a professional production garden, that brings some tension, because how much can you harvest that it still looks nice for the people who come to visit it? And also all those visitors take a lot of time of the people working in the garden. On the left, you see some students working in the garden. You see a beautiful way of making, here on the second one, of making the trellis for the peas to grow. You see the mixed cropping, and on the right, you see students from schools coming in. We also use as much historical plants as possible, but we only grow historical plants when they are also still edible, because some vegetables are forgotten because they're not nice to eat anymore. And some forgotten vegetables, old vegetables, find now a new life. In France, we found a lot of old equipment, and then we always check how it works. And we found out also that a French firm called Terratech, very interesting for colleague kitchen garden owners, made based on those old equipment, new equipment. An important thing you were working on in a kitchen garden is the healthy soil. And you can see that almost after 5 years after restoration, it's an important period. Only then you can tell if your soil is all right. And luckily, our soil became more and more healthy. So last year, we had a beautiful harvest. One of the things we also tested is lasagna mulching. And it was very nice that we were testing it. And at the same time, on an excursion to Versailles, I found that École Nationale Supérieure de Paysage in Versailles also had those test beds, and I made a picture of where it is explained. So lasagna bed means that you use a lot of greens and hay and straw and branches to make a layer, kind of a little mountain on which you can grow your plants. You put them in. And then during the year, it all deteriorates. And every year it gives you almost a centimeter of new soil. So it's a beautiful way, but a labor-intensive way to make your soil better. And we compared it also with the same vegetables growing in normal soil. Another thing we did together with Wageningen University is the FarmBot. FarmBot is a kind of a robot. It looks a bit like a 3D printer, which can sow the seeds, and it gives water exactly on the spot where the seed is. So you can see it looks very efficient, but in reality it's not too practical. It's really a first idea of robotics. And why do you test this type of robotics here in the garden? Is because on the left we test strip cropping. Strip cropping means not one big field of the same vegetable. And on the right you can test mixed cropping. So that means you make little plots of 50 by 50 centimeters with one vegetable. The whole idea is that mixing vegetables prevents you from diseases, prevents you from pests and plagues. And it really works because the plants help each other with bringing in nitrogen into the soil, and also the smell of one plant will prevent pests coming into the other plant. The combination between onion and carrot is well-known combination. Well, we work together with University Wageningen, as I told, with farming systems ecology. And this year we're working again with them together for a 5-year program on strip cropping. I go on. Well, important for us, one of our goals is to produce healthy food for the local market, and also in the form of a mixed farm. And to produce enough food, that means that on the left you see the walled garden, the kitchen garden. But on the right, you see we added other plots. So we have a total of about 2 hectares now, where we grow vegetables. So we invested in extra area to have enough produce to make it a serious local food production. And that is important when you want to earn enough money for maintaining your kitchen garden, that you need enough produce to sell. What we have as well next to it, also as a kind of financial support to maintaining the garden, but also to, like, gestionnaire of the woods, are the pigs. And the pigs live a lovely life here in the woods. They get older than normally, they move, they have a lot of space. It's an enormous attraction for visitors. Many people come here to look at the pigs, and the meat is also being sold in the shop. And what is very nice, that they eat the bad herbs which are in the woods, like the raspberries, which is quite a problem because there's too much nitrogen in the air. And you can see this was man-high raspberries here, and they're all gone now. We also on the estate have about 10 hectares where we grow cereal. You see on the right, strip cropping. So different strips of 6 to 12 meters of different cereals. And the effect of the strip cropping is a 2% higher yield while you have an organic production. And also our vegetables are organic, so no pesticides and no fertilizer. One of our things we still want to develop is agroforestry with chicken and nut trees, and probably also some cows on the fields. So we have a better life management for the animals, better soil management, and a combination. And then what's very important is the biodiversity. And that's what I also always call our natural partners. And the birds, so many bird cages on the estate and also in the vegetable garden. We have apiculteur, what is it in English? The guy who collects the honey and takes care of the bees, and the chicken will be one of our next projects. Only at the moment there's a big problem in Holland, and probably in the other countries as well, with the bird flu. So we have to wait